It's Friday. It's pre-recorded. Now the show Dozens Love the 9 Years podcast.
All right, everybody, welcome to the 9 Years podcast, episode 197. We are closing in on that 200th, which is really very scary in my mind. Nick Draper here. Later I will be joined by the face of the BBC Sport website, Mr. Stuart Deakins. But to start this show this week, I have been joined with Dave Boyle, which is a name I know a number of you will recognise. Dave's the former CEO of Supporters Direct. He is a Don's Trust member, Wimbledon fan. Very important in helping us set up as a trust back in 2002 and then setting up AFC Wimbledon later that year. He now runs his own company specialising in equity crowdfunding. We thought he'd be a fascinating person to speak to in regards to the current situation, which, Dave, the current situation which we face, I'm going to be honest with you, we did a podcast 2 weeks ago which first discussed the news once we'd got the letter from the Don's Trust explaining our £11 million shortfall 2 weeks ago, and I'm afraid I'm not sure we're any further forward since then, which is a bit of a concern considering time is of the essence and we're led to believe that we need to make decisions in January. So as a sort of overview of the situation, what are your thoughts on that? Do you think we are...
Yeah,
what do you think? What's our way out of this situation at the moment?
I think that when I read the document, my first thought, I'd been listening to a podcast recently by Tim Harford, who sometimes calls himself the undercover economist. He's got a column in the Financial Times, and he's got a podcast called Cautionary Tales, and there was one about what they called getting it doneism, where some people get involved in delivering a project and they get so deep into it that they just think whatever it takes, let's get it over the line, let's get this done. And they sometimes stop, they don't take a step back and go, hang on a minute, where are we? What really are our options, as opposed to what do our options look like if we've got our heads down and we're burrowing, trying to get through it. And I couldn't help but think of that idea when I read it, and it just struck me that I was unsettled by the timing of it, and the fact that the elections had taken place and nobody had raised this issue, and so our opportunity as members to hold the board to account, to scrutinise them, and to actually go who might be the best candidates to be on the Don's Trust board to help us get through this situation. That was completely missed, and I thought that was really poor, frankly, that happened. And then the meeting on Monday seemed to me to be sort of saying, well, actually, whilst we say January, we've actually maybe got until February. And it just sort of goes, well, that's not just another couple of weeks. It could be 8 weeks, it could be 4 weeks. And is it really important and is it not? And I agree that there's been a lot of noise and a lot of heat, but I'm not entirely sure there's much light. But I think the interesting thing from the meeting on Monday, which stood out for me, was this idea of a fans bond. And I think what slightly, I wouldn't say dismayed, but I was surprised at how taken aback some members of the Don's Trust board seemed to be at the idea that fans would have a really big appetite for digging much deeper to help the club out and get to Plough Lane and get the club and to sort of retain the fans' control of the club through the Don's Trust. And it seems to me that this has been ruled out as an option without any real thought or evidence. And that was really surprising to me, that there wasn't really a belief that fans and Don's Trust members and others would be prepared to dig that deep. And whereas, to my way of thinking, that's the first port of call. That should have been the first port of call, and it should have been earlier. But we are where we are. And whilst I think there will be a time for a degree of sort of sober analysis of how exactly it came to be that we got to this position and what lessons can be learned for the future in terms of the governance of the club and the governance of the trust and the relationship with members. I think it really now is just a case of let's get all these other options, which I think have been a little bit too hastily dismissed. Let's really get into the guts of it. And, there's already some activity taking place this week about trying to research just how many people would be prepared to invest into a bond to help the club at this particular point. There's been some discussion of whether Merton Council could use its powers to get a loan from the Treasury at pretty low interest rates over a pretty long period of time. Now, all of these ideas might end up going nowhere, but they're ideas which haven't been explored and yet were not going to be on the table when the paper first went out 2 weeks ago. So I think whilst we're not any further forward to solving it, I think we are further forward to sort of putting the rudiments of a solution in place, which avoids the sort of horrible Rubicon moment of option 4 and a restricted action vote at the AGM, the SGM in January.
Yeah, I wanted to sort of pick your brains about the option 4 in a little bit. Before that, I must admit I hold my hands up to the issue they were talking about funding shortfall. Trust club, whoever should first look to speak to the fans and see if there's an appetite there to, as you say, dig even deeper into pockets. It was meant not the bond suggestion, obviously, but in the original paper that was sent out, we talked about potentially initiating a second round of crowdfunding, perhaps looking at donations and what have you. And the thought process was there that, we'd already asked enough. And I'm guilty of this as well, because I would have written it off as well. The crowdfunding, we got 2.5 million. There was an upper limit of 7 million. I know people have since said they didn't feel that the urgency was there with that crowdfunding that made them think they must invest or they must find or spread the word to get more and more people investing. I get that argument. But I'm very much, and I know a lot of people, we speak to a lot of people who pockets have emptied, unfortunately. There isn't much more that they either can or are prepared to, because the nature of our club, over the years, we have been asked, or we ask of ourselves, whatever it is, in various different things. It could be going back to when we first started up, and of course there's so much goodwill that goes with our club, of course, but things such as the golden goal tickets, and then whoever would win that prize would almost automatically donate that straight back to the club and things like that. I think people are over time have moved away from that. And I must admit, I'm hearing very positive things about the bond. I think it's a great idea. I think it's great that fans have gone out and investigated the possibility and put a survey together to see what's there. How much money do you think we would be looking to raise from something like that would then perhaps put a big enough dent in our shortfall that a bank loan or a loan from elsewhere becomes a more realistic possibility if we could knock it down to, say, 4 or 5 million as opposed to 11 million?
Well, it's hard to say. I remember doing some analysis. I was asked by somebody who used to be on the Don's Trust board about 3 or 4 years ago. In my day job, I help community organisations and other not-for-profit organisations like the Don's Trust raise capital to undertake projects. And you develop a way of assessing how much do you think is a sort of realistic sum an organisation like the Don's Trust could have been realistically aiming for if it was doing something like that. And I sort of thought that 7 million was a very reasonable ask. And I was really surprised that the Cedars campaign sort of didn't do so well. And I think there are some things which you could have and maybe should have been taken into account, like the spread between the minimum and the maximum of 2 to 7 million. All the experience I've had in this kind of sector says that once you set a minimum of a certain level, you don't really go past. People start to think, oh, you're just being greedy now. You said you needed 2 million at least, and you'd be happy with that. Well, you're already at 2.5 million, so basically you're clearly going to be fine with this. And I think it was always going to be difficult to get to 7 million when you start the minimum at 2. And little things like that, I think there was perhaps maybe a clearer eye should have been taken on it. But I think in terms of, I think there is an untapped market, and whilst there is clearly going to be lots of people who did dig very deep for Cedars, and they really did put in every spare penny they could legitimately afford, it just struck me as being well below what we should be aiming for. We forget that the club is in one of the richest areas, in one of the richest cities, in one of the richest countries in the world. Now, if you look at what's been done comparatively in other parts of the country. 10 years ago, FC United of Manchester raised about £2.4 million from, this was much closer to the recession. It was 2010 and 11 when they were raising this. And they were raising it with a fan base of around 2,000 people who went there on a regular basis. And they raised 2 million. Now, it just strikes me that for us to sort of match that with a fan base 3-4 times as big as that in an area which is probably, 1.5 twice as wealthy, it just struck me as it was slightly lowballing it. So I think there is some headroom. And I know that there are people who didn't dig as deep, because the message they were getting from the campaign was that we're at 2.5 million and that's going to be tickety-boo, because with this we can do the rest of it, and everything's going to be happy, and everybody's going to be watching us play in Plough Lane in 18 months. And they're now thinking, well, if I'd have genuinely known how dicey the situation was, I definitely would have put in more. And that's the situation we're in now. So it always comes down to who does one speak to. So if people have been speaking to people who've been telling the people involved at the trust and the club, we've maxed out, I've got nothing left I can put into this, then that's probably going to lead you to be pessimistic about the opportunities for further finance raising from fans. But I think, that's one of the skills and one of the requirements of people involved in those positions, to make sure we're talking to as wide a range of people as possible, because not everybody has the same perspective. And there is clearly a perspective which a lot of other people have, which says we didn't get to the bottom of what I had, and there's plenty of appetite for investing more, especially given this is a one-off. This isn't a kind of just help the club along a bit. This is to get back to Plough Lane. This is a kind of not even once in a generation. This isn't a once in a century kind of thing. And at the same time, the club is clearly going through some very challenging, to say the least, some very challenging times. You put those two things together, and I think it's inconceivable that we shouldn't get at least 2 million. I think we should be looking at more like 4 to 5 million. Those will be realistic targets for me in this particular process. And if we can, there's also a wider market of people, because if we're marketing a bond, then what we're saying is this is an investment and you're going to get a small rate of interest, and interest rates are at a historically low level. Most people who have cash savings, which is where the money which they will be putting into bonds is currently stashed, it's in a cash ISA in a bank, and it's earning 0.25 to 0.5 interest per year. So if we can quadruple the rate of interest they're getting, then it's a reasonable financial investment for people who don't need the money for the next 5-10 years. And there are people who've been investing in all sorts of things like this across the country. Renewable energy, for example, has raised £180 million on those kinds of numbers in the past few years. And that market's completely collapsed because of wider changes to the regulatory and tax environment. But it means there's lots of people who've got used to investing in ethical propositions, which make the world a better place, which are not for profit, which have got great profiles and can offer a small return. That's exactly where our bond's going to be if we can get one out the door in time. So I think it's not just about fans. There are people out there, and I think there's often been a scepticism. I likened it to, there's a slight view, I think, amongst the Wimbledon fan base that everybody loves us and we don't care. And I think if we, there is still an enormous reservoir of goodwill. It's why The Guardian are writing 2 articles about us in the last week, because of what we stand for. And I know that's, to some people, they get a little, it sticks in the craw. It's like, we don't want to be anybody's poster boy or girl. We just want to be a football club in South West London. But at times like this, it's really helpful to have poster boy and girl potential, because that's the thing which is going to help suck in a bit more money, because there are people around the world who will be genuinely heartbroken if the outcome of this is that we cease to be a fan-owned club. And they are prepared to invest in that, because we've always been a beacon. And I think that's still got possibilities for us.
Did we not reach out well enough then with the Cedars campaign? Can you think why that would be the case?
I think, again, it comes down to, I don't want to say too much because it starts to look like, I don't think now's the time for recriminations and I don't think it does any good. It's about how can we make sure we do it even better or better next time. I think it just comes down to urgency. It comes down to identifying who the people are. And I think the art of selling stuff to fans based on owning a football club with a story like ours, it's not something which lends itself easily to standard marketing. A lot of the work I do is about selling ownership and making something feel like ownership matters. And I never really got that sense from the campaign myself. I think it was a little bit confused, and I think we hid our light under a bushel. And we certainly didn't have the clock ticking and the jeopardy narrative or the sword of Damocles, whatever metaphor or turn of phrase you want. We've now got that jeopardy. And when you do any type of crowdfunding, if you've got a kind of, if we don't do X by Y date, then Z thing happens and Z is bad, then that's, whilst it's not a good look, in the sense of it's kind of, it's not washing your dirty linen in public, but it's making quite a public statement about the financial difficulties. But we're already there. That's already been done. When you send a letter out to 2,000 people, that kind of does that anyway. So the upside of that is that it's going to concentrate the mind. Now, the timing's not great. Christmas is coming up. It's never a great time to be raising money from people. But the advantage here is that most people's investment into a fan's bond or anything else like that, the critical thing is it's not a donation. That's another part of this strategy that, we could follow it with donations. I mean, frankly, that's nonsense. And it always was nonsense, because the average you get from a donation has been historically the same for the past 80 years in this country, and it's £50 per person. So we're going to need an absolute, we're going to need thousands upon thousands upon thousands of donations to dent this. When they make investments into bonds, people go to their savings and they tend not to use their day-to-day spending. But that day-to-day spending is what they'll be using to buy Christmas presents for their families and so on and so forth. So it's not the greatest time in the world to be going to ask people to dig deeper, but it's also, we don't need to sort of be all doom and gloom about it, because a lot of the money which people are going to be invested isn't money they will be taking away from their children to stop them getting lovely Christmas presents or anything like that. It's money which is sitting in the bank and doing nothing and will remain untouched across the Christmas period.
Just got me thinking about Christmas presents and AFC Wimbledon calendars that normally come out. Just wondering if there's like a Kwesi Appiah month this year. We'll see. Anyway, the bond then, in terms of the actual setting it up and making it happen and timings, and I'm guessing there's all sorts of legal things that need to be sorted out.
Yeah.
Do you have any sort of knowledge of experience about how long these things can take to get together?
Well, I think the critical thing is that there are two elements which are necessary. The first is to identify what would be issuing the bond. Now, for all sorts of practical regulatory reasons, the ideal thing to issue the bond would be the Don's Trust, because the Don's Trust is a community benefit society, and community benefit societies have, through a quirk of the regulations and the law, have a blanket exemption from the regulatory apparatus which would govern the issue of a bond if it was done by either the football club or the PLC or the wider interests of Football Limited. So all of those entities, if they issue a bond, that takes time, because you've got to get it regulated and you've got to get it signed off. And whilst I'm absolutely sure we could draw down on some people in our own fan base who could help us, there is a point at which it's very difficult to get that kind of work done pro bono, because it's something which people tend not to give away for free, no matter how much they love the club, because their companies don't like them doing it on a pro bono basis. However, if you did it through the Don's Trust, you'd avoid all of that, and you could get a bond into the marketplace, as it were, very quickly. It's relatively simple to write the bond documentation. The critical thing would then be, what's the interest rate we can offer, and can we be sure we can get it back? Because the Don's Trust would get a load of, let's say it gets £5 million. It then has to lend the money to whichever body will be taking the development of the stadium forward and over the line. And that money would need to be then paid back to the Don's Trust, because that's the source of the money to pay back the bondholders. So there's a bit of, I wouldn't say jiggery-pokery, there's a bit of thinking about the architecture of this and the money flow. But it's not too difficult to imagine how to do it. It just needs all the people who are necessary to make this happen to be in a room and to agree it. And, we already know that meetings are now starting to take place to explore this, which they weren't a week ago. So that's really, really positive. It's to liken it to, it always felt like the idea that option 4 was the regrettable but only remaining option, in that kind of, if you eliminate the impossible, whatever remains, however implausible, must be the correct. It always felt a little bit like old Mother Hubbard had gone to the cupboard and found that it was bare, and therefore option 4 was the only one on the table. And I think there was a feeling from some of us who've been trying to sort of raise this issue up the agenda that perhaps old Mother Hubbard didn't have her spectacles on, and perhaps it was a bit darker in the kitchen and she could put another bulb in the lamp and maybe it would be a bit brighter and she'd see a few more things lying at the back of the cupboard which could come in handy. And I think that's where we're moving towards now. And in terms of just, it's very easy to see how we can get all this done. Then there's the marketing of it, but the advantage of the situation and the degree of crisis which attends to it means that when you've got national newspapers writing stories about it, that's also a way to get free advertising. When you've been sending letters out to 2,000 Don's Trust members, they're already primed. They're not going to receive a letter and go, crisis? What crisis? They're going to be brilliant. This is an opportunity to get to sort of break the dilemma where we're going to force into, voting for option 4 or some horrible alternative, which, is a kind of Hobson's choice with a gun to our head. People are going to be seizing upon that with some degree of alacrity. So I don't think we need to take too long about it, but by the same token, we mustn't rush it in a somewhat sort of dash to get this out ASAP. There are some we need to run the numbers through and alongside the club's business plan, and we need to interrogate the business case for the stadium and what revenues were going to be generated, and just to make sure it all stacks up, because what we don't want to be doing is essentially kicking the can down the road. So we borrow 4 million from our fans, and then we have to say to those fans in 12 months' time, actually, sorry, it was a bit of a dog's breakfast. We didn't really do the numbers on it, and actually, we're not going to be able to pay you what we said we were going to pay you, and it's all rather embarrassing. We don't want to do that either. So we need to make sure we're standing on solid ground, but I don't think it should take too long to get to that position where we are standing on solid ground.
You brought it up there then. Option 4, the proverbial gun to our heads. Where are we standing with this one? We understand that there have been initial conversations about potential investors, the details of which the opening salvo, as it were, I don't think anyone in their right minds is looking. Even if you have the most pro external investment person out there, I can't imagine they'd look at what was presented or what was currently on the table as being anything realistic. It would get voted down. But what it has done is it has, to steal a phrase I heard on Monday night, the genie has come out of the bottle a little bit here, because all of a sudden you've got a position where there's a sizable growing number of people that are actually saying, do you know what? We welcome external investment. We'd be quite happy to sell off the majority of voting percentage and what have you. And we think this is the way forward for our football club. Is the danger with this now we've spoken about this over the last couple of weeks about almost how this has become a binary option in terms of financing, and we've allayed all that over the last 20 minutes or so. But in a lot of people's heads, they are still looking at this as being a very simple black and white issue: external investment or basically doom. And yes. How do we reconcile this now? Because there are going to be I'm still of the opinion, and this is not my opinion, but having seen the meeting on Monday night, there was a large and growing number of people, no, I say growing, but there was a large vocal amount of people in attendance on Monday that were very much saying, no, we need to be not thinking about setting up our fan ownership, because once it's gone, and we don't get it back. But yeah. The issue is, if you've got, I'm still convinced that the people that are not as vocal, perhaps with one or two exceptions on Monday, there will be people who feel like they do want to set up, but they don't feel confident enough to raise their head. I likened it to Brexit, where certain Brexiteers might kind of keep it hush-hush that they voted Brexit. They don't want to be seen to being one of those people, if that makes sense. Yeah. How do you reconcile their voices? How do we rule out external investment without saying to those people, well, we're actually going to completely ignore your opinion?
I'm always slightly sceptical about speaking on behalf of people who, by definition, are silent. It's a bit of a kind of
that's fair.
It's kind of, any side can say, well, the people who are not saying anything, well, they're on my side, and the other people go, no, they're not saying anything because they're on my side, and the answer is we don't actually know. I think there is a legitimate debate to be had amongst the fan base about how much they want to persist with this model. Now, we know the last time the club were asked in any degree of earnestness, the members of the Dons Trust were asked in any degree of earnestness about what were their priorities. And their priorities were, this was a survey done in conjunction with somebody at the New Economics Foundation. It was a big piece of work they did, and it involved sort of consensus voting, where people don't sort of go, well, it's my way or the highway. It's not. It precisely avoids that kind of binary option. But where they actually were said, it was about trying to find what the things would get support from most people, and those things were retaining our status as a fan-owned club. And so the last time there was anything like a degree of scientific surveying of the members of the Dons Trust, they were passionately committed to that. Now, who's to say whether that's changed? I think one of the things this whole thing is sort of showing is that I think to some extent the trust as an entity has perhaps been, guilty of neglecting its roots and neglecting to ask fans on a regular basis, what do you want? I think there's a place for doing that kind of exercise, certainly every 2 to 3 years, and ideally every year, because you've got to, what's the point of owning a football club if you never get listened to? It might feel very similar. So we shouldn't be surprised if people go, I don't really get what the point of this is, if their experience of being an owner of a football club is essentially you don't get asked what your opinion is. You get to go to meetings which are frankly dull and tedious, and they are looking like a certain section of the fan base which isn't as young and vibrant and newer to the club and are perhaps post 2002 era fans. You might look at it and think, I just don't get what the big deal about all of this is. And that's, a completely legitimate feeling. It's not one I share, but I can totally understand how it happens. And it's the responsibility of those, both of us in the fan base who take a different view, and indeed of the Dons Trust, to be constantly doing this. And it's a tough thing. And I don't say these things in a kind of, get on and do it and it will be dead easy and you click your fingers. But I do think there is I do think there's been something strange about the way the culture of ownership within the club has developed over the past, since the start. I remember going to a celebration in 2003 to celebrate the year, a year since the club was founded. And it was a joyous thing. And I remember thinking, this is brilliant. This is almost like Independence Day. We should have it every 29th of May, every year, to celebrate and to commiserate for what had happened and to celebrate how we've turned it around. And lots of people sort of looked and went, nah, we're not going to be doing that. And I remember thinking at the time, eventually there will come a point where the only people who can remember about why the fan ownership really matters in the final analysis are old stagers who were from 2002. And eventually those people will become the minority of the fan base. And that's going to be a problem. And look what's happened. This is exactly the circumstance I think we're finding ourselves in now. But what I do think is not the way to have this debate is, as we've used the term, putting a gun to our head. If fans, if you don't want to be the owners of your football club, then you should be able to make that decision, not just when there's a crisis, but actually because you don't think it's working and we should look to be moving it on. I think that to sort of, there are circumstances under which you could see how fans could basically move on and say, we've had enough. We don't wish to own the football club. But this isn't one of them. You can't be saying to people, we need to do this because our finances are screwed. But by the way, you've not yet seen the accounts because we've not had them to be able to send to everybody. Just not tenable. And you can't also be saying, we're going to potentially selling to investors, because actually they're not investors. They're buyers. Then, as the oldest joke in football goes, how do you make a small fortune in football? You take a large fortune and you flush it down the toilet at a football club. And, the only way you ever get a return on your investment is if you manage to take the club up to the Premier League. And then you'll find lots of people who want to buy it from you. But that's a very hard ask, and the vast majority of clubs in this country don't make it to the Premier League, and the people who invest in them and who call it investment actually turn out to lose pretty much all of their money and then sell it on to somebody else in a degree of failure. That's the reality of it. But but calling these people investors is I think a little bit incorrect, because it's not really what they're doing. They're looking to buy the club and become the driving force on it. And I don't buy this 30% kind of argument. It's the trust would have 3 seats on a board in which there would automatically be 7 people, and 2 other people would be chosen. Those people are not going to be, let's pick somebody from the terraces. Let's pick somebody who represents the beating heart of our young fans, who's got to be under the age of 20 and has got to be somebody who wasn't around in 2002. That's just not going to happen. And I think it's not even a slippery slope. It will be falling off a cliff, as Chris Stewart said at the meeting on Monday. We lose control from day one. I think that's absolutely right. And anybody who tries to suggest otherwise, I think, needs to look at the small print and be honest about what actually the implications of this option 4 would be.
So in a year's time, imagine we are still owned by the trust, run by the fans. We're a little bit short of time, but as quickly as you can. How would you surmise how you'd like the governance? You've mentioned governance of the football club.
Yeah.
How would you like that to perhaps change? Are you satisfied with how things are run currently with the model we have, or what are the areas in which we need to fine tune what we're currently doing?
I've always found the Don's Trust model of governance to be weird, and I think you can almost date this to the very foundation of the trust. At exactly the time there was also the Wimbledon Independent Supporters Association, which was in the middle of trying to stop Milton Keynes actually happening. And so a lot of the people who would have been ideal to be on the board of the trust, especially when it becomes to create a football club, were otherwise engaged, and they were involved in another organisation. And I think it never got off to the best start. And these things tend to get locked into the DNA. So I've always found it really odd that we've had this football club board and then the PLC and then the Don's Trust. That's twice as many steps as there is at FC Schalke. At FC Schalke 04 in Germany, 60,000 fans, and they own the football club and they vote for the board of directors of the football club, not the board of directors of a company, which then has the majority stake on the board of another company, which then runs the football club and appoints the manager. It just doesn't work like that. There's no need for it to work like that. And in football, the whole notion of holding companies and parents. I remember back in the day in something like 1998, Leicester City, there was a split between the PLC, which owned the football club, and the football club board itself. So essentially the subsidiary company started a fight with its parent company. Now, in any other walk of corporate life, when the parent company says something, everything else happens. But in a football club, because they had Martin O'Neill, who was then the manager of Leicester City, allied with the football club board, you actually had the subsidiary basically telling the PLC, who was its nominal controlling body, to get stuffed. And they won. And in football, where, the closer you are to the action, the closer you are to the site of who appoints the manager, who decides the player's contract, who decides to sign off on which players we buy or not, who sets the playing budget, and so on and so forth. The actual place where that happens is the sexy end of the spectrum. That's what people are interested in. And it's always struck me that to some extent it's felt like there's been a desire to keep the Don's Trust and its as the democratically elected representative body of members, almost as far away from that as possible, as if things would never go right if they got involved. And that always struck me as odd. That's how it seemed from afar. And, I know that there are circumstances about the creation of the PLC with the share issue to get Kings Meadow back in 2003. But as a whole, it's, the fact that the trust has never really had a marketing budget. It's never really, the club has never seen it as a cost of doing business. That there is this organisation which is run on behalf of fans and which fans are elected to. And we're still asking a bunch of people to go around in their spare time, going into the stairwell at work to have conversations whilst their boss is supposed to be, they're supposed to be in a meeting at their place of work to make decisions about the football club. Now, this has always struck me as absolutely insane. If we want to have a football club which is owned by us as fans, then there is a cost to that. We have to make it easier for people to do this.
Dave, thank you very much for your time this week. And it's at this juncture, as I said at the start of this week's podcast, that we welcome Stu back to the show, or to the show, I suppose, this week for the first time. Anyway, Stu, how are you?
Tired. It's been a long week. It's been a really long week, and as they say, a long week in football, but this is the second week of a longest week of football. I'm tired. I don't know about you, mate.
I'm absolutely shattered. I don't have time for all this bullshit about the football club right now, to be honest with you. There's too much other pressures on my time. I just cannot be doing with it.
Like when you have your Christmas holiday.
Oh, wow. That seems a long way away, I'll tell you. Blimey, do I need that? Do you know what I need my Christmas holiday for, Stu? To actually do work.
I know.
In my job, I just don't get any work done. I'm constantly interrupted. Oh, anyway, that's a whinge for another day. We've got a big whinge coming in January about my... Anyway, save that for another day.
Yes.
What was I going to say? Yes. So Monday, of course, was a very long day as well. And that has probably contributed to our tired state because we were, well, what time did that finish? 11 o'clock? Just before 11 when we left Kingsmeadow?
Yeah,
Monday after the meeting on Monday?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, Stu, Dave and myself have had that conversation about his views on what happened on Monday, and I've said my piece a little bit, but what did you make of the SGM?
Difficult. I felt we went over a lot of old ground. I felt the presentation covered a lot of stuff that had been sent out that we'd all had a chance to read. I get why you may do that. I think that me personally, I wanted to have more time on discussion on bits and pieces. I felt some bits were rushed. I think some bits that Mark Davis just didn't have the answers, and that might be a simple case that there's still ongoing negotiations because it's very much a live situation in terms of things are changing probably daily. But yeah, it was. I don't feel I got as much out of it as I wanted. There's a few. I have sort of changed my stance a little bit from where I was saying about external investment and stuff like that. And not that we must have external investment, but I think I've simmered a little bit on. I think there's a few other options that I would like us to investigate further that come out of the meeting. So, but it just again, I think the message that I wasn't too sure on was: are we going to vote in January? Is it going to be February? It felt like it was all very much, it must be done very quickly. But then the message was a little bit mixed on terms of, well, how long? I thought the vote was going to be very much first bit of January, but it could be it could be 3 months. And then by then we might have other options. So still confused. But it's a difficult situation, isn't it?
Very, yeah. I mean, I'm confused. I said to Dave, sort of feel like, I personally felt like coming out of Monday, we weren't particularly any further forward. And you're right, that doesn't perhaps hint at an organisation that is particularly stressed or, do you know what I mean, really pressed up against time. So maybe there is more wiggle room than we thought. Dave's thoughts were the big sort of step forward is that the idea that there are potential other avenues we can look at as opposed to the solution that were originally given to us in the original paper, which, option 4 being the most contentious of those and the sort of gun-to-head scenario. The bond issue has come up and a lot of research has been done into this, and Stu won't know this, but we spoke about that, or I spoke about that with Dave and talked about the ins and outs of it and what have you, and I'm just seeing that information about that has come out between the time I spoke to Dave and the time I'm speaking to you now. In the region of £1 million has been pledged by about 300 people in a part of a bond scheme. Now, that is, it's a difficult one to judge because you don't know. There's too many questions and variables and things can change in that time. But I mean, Dave was of the opinion we'd probably need to look at about 5 million being raised in total for that to be a way forward.
So double what we got for Cedars.
Yes. And the issues with the Cedars crowdfunding campaign and what have you, and why that didn't take off. What did you make of the Cedars campaign? Because this was a question that was raised on Monday, and a couple of people saying, well, we didn't really realise the urgency of it, and had we known there was going to be problems, then we'd have probably put more in, or we've spoken to other people and got them involved and everything like that. What I wondered about this was, because it's linking two things. There's also people saying about the club or trust not having a contingency if the crowdfunding, the Cedars, didn't go as well as they perhaps hoped, and it clearly didn't. If you put the £7 million target on there, and 2.5 million is what we got, but was not the contingency these investors that they hoped would just put the money into that side of things and beef up that, or reach that 7 million target quite happily or quite easily?
Yeah, do you know what? If I'm being totally honest with you, I think Mark Davis tried to black his way through the Cedars explanation. I'd rather him been, held his hands up and say, do you know what? Maybe we weren't as honest, and there might be reasons why we weren't as honest, But again, from a personal point of view, there were some things that were said that I really did get my back up in terms of, Mark did so. And this isn't a dig at Mark Davis. I'm, fully aware of the time he spends and a very, very difficult job as a Don's Trust board. I don't think when he went onto the Don's Trust, he thought he was going to be in charge of a £30 million project. But, when he said, we did tell everyone to empty their pockets, it really bugged me, because, how many times do we keep emptying our pockets? And this is the argument about external investment. A fans-owned club is supported by the fans, by their money. We're now a League One club. And my personal opinion is we can't keep rinsing the fans. And I think that's starting to tell. You've still got Wimbledon, has some rich fans or well-off fans. And I think there was many people in the room on Monday night who were quite happy to go, look, but when we done a raise of hands who can put 3,000 in, I felt a little bit uncomfortable with the haves and have-nots. I'm quite happy to say now I put £100 into Cedars, but actually, with a young child and a family, that's all I could really afford. I'm not going to put 3,000 into a club, because I don't know actually when am I going to have to do that again, because this is going to come up constantly. But I've gone off a little bit of topic there, because you've raised a subject that I'm a little bit annoyed with. But I feel Mark saying that we had a really strong message, and he used the Vinnie Jones video and John Green, but it was diluted because there was nothing what really needs to be said. And I don't know whether we could have said it, but basically, if we don't hit round about sort of £4, £5, £6 million, we're fucked. That's what the message needs to come out, because actually Esther, do you know what? I've known Esther for many years, and she made me crack up when she said, I don't really want to stand up. Because to be fair to Esther, if she stood up, she'd have been no taller. But she made a great point. She said, I just didn't know. You didn't say how serious it was. Yes, we may have had all these fancy adverts, and we had the marketing was really good in Wimbledon. But at no point did it say, if we do not get a certain figure, we are fucked. And Mark tried to blag his way through that. And he has to be honest and say that in that room of 100 people, half of them, let's be fair, half of them are deaf and half of them can't see. I'd probably come in under the deaf side of it. But at no point was it made very, very clear that if we do not get this funding, we would then be in this situation. And I would rather Mark have just been honest and said, we couldn't say it for this reason, or do you know what, yeah, hands up, maybe we didn't go as, we've now gone very serious, when actually we needed to say that in the summer.
I think there's absolutely the reason we wouldn't have said it was because we didn't want to. It's not a very good message to send out, I suppose, if you're looking at the time to be talking to people that had substantial amounts of money that they could put in. I don't think that particularly. Would you be confident to say to them, these people, that this is the situation we're in? Unfortunately, what happens is, and they've clocked it. This is the issue. It was interesting. Dave referred to these people not as investors, as they were essentially just people looking to buy the club. They were looking to take the club. They weren't investing in it. It's a real double-edged sword, isn't it? Because on the one hand, you don't want to say, we're in huge amounts of trouble, please give as much as you can, when you've got these multi-million pounds potentially sitting there waiting to get involved. On the other hand, these investors seem to have spotted this anyway and have sought out an opportunity. And they've seen a potential for them to just grab and take power. And that's a very cynical view of it.
We are making
well, we
assumptions.
are making assumptions.
And
This is the problem with
side of it.
so many assumptions.
Yeah.
This is the whole thing. This is the whole thing about all these conversations that everybody's having right now, is there are a lot of assumptions. And like I said, Dave, this is why I don't feel like we're any further forward, because even with the Bond thing, which I think is a strong idea, I think there's legs in this, but there's also assumptions, because I don't know how many of those 300 people that have responded at the time of recording, what happens in a month's time when they're actually asked to pay up. Do they still have that ability to do it? Do they still have do you know what I mean? There's just too many variables and things that we just can't nail down.
Yeah, and it's good. Don't get me wrong. You know, Xavier, who's doing it, we're doing something. So fans, you can't moan and go, well, we're doing something that might not work. But actually, they're trying to do something. They're investigating and helping the club. I felt there was a reluctance to get help. If I'm being honest with you, it felt very much we've done everything and no, we've tried that. And, you know, the comment of, well, you know, I know someone of someone in a pub, or it felt very much a little bit belittling the fan base. Do you know what I mean? This is a fan's own club. Don't have the meeting if you don't want a fan's opinion. You know, yes, I get the fact you might be a bit defensive. It's not a great situation, but there was quite a few confrontational questions, if I put it that way. But I didn't put, you know, when they've done the raise of hands, or would you take, you know, would you want to be a fan? I think, you know, would you take investment? Or I didn't vote for it. I didn't put my hand up for either, because I still don't feel that I can make an informed decision until, you know, Mark Davis did say that, you know, if we feel we want to go for external investment, then those people will make themselves known. It's too late. At the moment, I can't make a call whether I, you know, would go for external investment. Yes, I want to see about the leaseback option. I wouldn't. The bonds is a good idea. Can Merton Council help with a guarantee? But ultimately, these investors, we need to hear from them, because they're a big. That room to me was not representative of what I'm hearing, and it doesn't mean that I've got better information. But from a group of, I probably know, I don't know, 50, 60, 70 Wimbledon fans that I could probably quite easily have a conversation with. In terms of that, you know, I know, and everyone that I speak to who then knows those people are saying to me, actually, do you know what? They're quite keen for investment. But it's the Brexit argument, isn't it? Do you know what I mean? If you were a Leaver, you didn't really want to put your hands up because you knew you're going to be shot down. But we need to know who these investors are, hear them, smell them. Well, maybe not smell them, but, you know, hear about them, and then you can make an informed decision.
Well, what did come from Monday was the meeting was streamed. The fact that the meeting was streamed live. Stu, somehow we managed to do it in the end. Technology, not my friend this week. Really not. This podcast has taken 3 days to record, as my Wi-Fi... Oh, I'm not going to say it then. Honestly, how many times have we tried to actually record this anyway? But yeah, we got there, so that was good, and I hope everyone found it valuable that we could actually screen these meetings and people could stay at home and watch and things like that. I think it's very valuable. We've got a few thank yous to say, haven't we, with people at the club. We've got Chris at the club, Jim at the club, David Charles at the club, all very helpful to making it, from, you know, getting things ready for us to actually make it happen. Rob Crane, Luke McKenzie, Hannah Kitcher on the board, who were helping organise things and make sure the message got out there and what have you. So thank you to everyone that assisted. Huge thank you to Mark Hendricks for sorting us out with all the technology and the equipment and getting us ready to go live and everything like that. Thank you for all the time put in, Mark, making that a success. And then George, of course, doing the roaming camera work. And it's not... Legend. I tell you what, that's not an easy job. That's 3 hours of being on your feet, going around that room, trying to find angles and whatever, not really switching off. So stellar work, George. We'll keep you on for this week.
Yeah, he done a great job, to be fair. It wasn't easy. We obviously couldn't get it on YouTube. The software we use had an update, and then that didn't link in with YouTube. We had a bit of a workaround, but as typical it would, with about 300 people staring, not 300 people staring at you, but 300 people in a room, and what did we go? We tried to go on about 25 minutes beforehand, and in the end we always had a fail-safe to go on Facebook, which wasn't always our preferred option, but we knew it would work. And then, stupidly, because we were so stressed, I then forgot to put the right feed on, so we had a blank screen for a little while. But yeah, it was a little bit of a pressure, and I would like to say thank Luke and Rob, who were close by, and I have to say, they kept calm when they knew very well that we were struggling. So I do really thank them for that, because that really did make a big difference, because it was a pressured situation. It's the first time we had been asked. We have offered many times through the years, and for whatever reason, it wasn't felt that it was the right thing to do. But I would just like to thank the Don's Trust Board, the collective, for giving us the most easiest gig to start with. There's a lot more easier warm-ups we could have done. But I think, I don't know about you, but I really enjoyed it. It was hard work. From my point of view, I didn't necessarily I had to watch it back afterwards, because we had 1,400
Wow.
1,400 comments we had.
Wow.
On the evening. And you were going through that, weren't you, and trying to keep up to date. Some were hilarious, some were weird, some of the comments were rude, but they were mainly from people from Buckinghamshire who thought it'd be funny to watch us rather than concentrate on their own team. That's your own choice, mate. But yeah, there was a lot going on, but I enjoyed it. I'm glad that we offered. I think it was a really important meeting, that it got out the correct information, and it wasn't a lot of Chinese whispers. He said that. It's all there for people to see. I don't know about you, but I'd be really keen to do it again, because I think at the moment we're going through probably the most important part of our AFC Wimbledon time at the moment. This is a big thing. I think it's really important that we get the message out, and I'm sure we will be involved moving forward.
Yes, fingers crossed it'll be good. I believe there'll be another meeting in January, so we'll go from there, and who knows? Well, who knows what the future holds, really? I'm still a bit deflated about the whole thing, if I'm being honest with you. I just don't know where we go from here. We do seem to be, anyway. Well, we could talk about it forever and a day, couldn't we? But
well, yeah, I was just going to say, one thing that was interesting, and again, what I was saying before about it being very much a live situation, was that the option about having the rudimental
don't try that joke again. My word.
I know. Well, I can't think of the actual word.
Rudimentary.
The thing is, I actually now have changed the word. It's like when I talk about O'Reilly. I now think we have a player called O'Reilly, because I called him so many times that's his name now in my head. God knows what goes on in there.
Yeah, no, we don't want to go into that. No.
But one of the things that was interesting was Mark Davis actually said that option is no longer viable in terms of having a 3,250 stand. So that all of a sudden, that option's now gone.
Yeah. So it seems to be, like we said, it's come down to, without other options that we're investigating, we've spoken about, it did seem to come down to a very binary option of investment or I called it earlier, doom. And I think this is why now we have to look at other avenues and hope something comes off, because neither are good for differing reasons.
No, and I think there was some interesting, like, there was people that I'd not heard of before. We had the financial controller who got up and spoke some figures, and I felt a little bit for him, because he wasn't really too sure what he could say. Again, so difficult. I do understand that, the Don's Trust Board are in meetings of the afternoon getting all the slides together, so I get it. We have to again remind people these are volunteers. They have a full-time job in their spare time. It's very difficult, and there was a lot of people baying for blood, if I'm being honest with you. There was some people that just really wanted to make sure they tripped them up, and that to me wasn't what it was all about. But yeah, I don't know if there was one slide that was interesting about the budget of where we would be if we got, no loan, £3 million, and actually we didn't really move that much. We didn't actually move that far up. We still would just be roughly a bottom half League One club, even with the investment, because it's interesting what some people were saying now, that realistically we thought moving to Plough Lane, the extra income would help us have a better budget, but actually because of the loan size we need, it's actually going to service the debt. So we actually aren't even going to be that much better off in terms of playing budget, which, yeah, it's weighing up, isn't it? It's weighing up Plough Lane, how important is it having a ground? But, we're going to be servicing a debt for a long while unless we get any other options.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, the stadium we have to get the stadium. It's the only way we've got a future is getting that stadium built, with all the revenue generation. As you say, yes, for a few years it's not going to be, it's not going to be great fun, perhaps, in terms of playing budget and what have you. Don't forget, we've still got lots of other considerations that we've spoken about over the last couple of weeks. This isn't just a discussion of finances in regard to playing budget. We thought that the stadium would also allow us to grow as a club in professionalism, in more numbers, backroom staff and what have you, and that seems unlikely as well now. So we're very much going to be in a threadbare shoestring situation for a long time yet, whatever happens. Do you think there's merit in terms of the external investment option? Do you think there's merit in us being, or they being unveiled to us? Or do you think very much that having given the initial details of the proposal that people don't see a future for it in its current state and therefore it'd be a bit pointless?
Well, I said early on I want to see them and see who they are and maybe hear from them and see what they, why are they interested? What are they? Hey, look, they could sell you a pack of lies. It depends who they are. At this stage, I don't think £7.5 million for 30% of the club, which would give them obviously people on the board and stuff. I just feel that's some people just realising we're proper desperate and we'll take anything. I think we need to go back and renegotiate it. Or what we may find is, and what some people again have alluded to, is that now that it's out in the open, a lot of papers have covered this. The Evening Standard and the Independent. It may actually, if we are considering external investment, it might bring other people forward. Darren, I'm not going to keep going about Darren McAntony, but he was interested a long time ago, and I know that was more because of some of his business partners who are Wimbledon fans. But it might bring some other people out who actually might make a realistic. If we're I don't really want to get £7.5 million and then still have to get another loan. That seems stupid. Come in with some serious money, and then maybe we get a bit serious talking. But we are in a. Hey, look, I'm probably carrying my argument. We are desperate, but I don't want to sell in a desperate position because it ain't. We moan about Kings Meadow and the entertainment on the pitch. The pitch, no matter how much you think about it, what happens on the pitch does influence an awful lot of people's opinion, and I don't really want to see, the rubbish that we've had recently.
Well, that's the conundrum, isn't it? We were set up under that famous line, "I just want to watch football." And for a lot of people, that is basically what they want, and nothing else. And they don't want to get involved in the other side of things, which is absolutely fine. It makes it very difficult when you've got. What I understand is close to. What my understanding about membership at Don's Trust, I think we're nearly hitting the 4,000 mark. From what I was told about the numbers that were eligible to vote for the latest elections, and then the anecdotal evidence of how many people and how busy membership secretary has been over the last couple of weeks with people rejoining and what have you. I think we might be pushing to 4,000, which does, like we said before, like any sort of restricted action vote, then suddenly it becomes exponentially harder to get through, or more difficult depending on how you phrase that vote. I mean, that's another conversation for another day. I think we need an indicative vote of where people's an official Don's Trust membership vote of where the land lies. And of course they could be as useful as exit polls in the general election, which we won't speak about either. But I think it's probably worth doing, especially. I don't know what the next step is. I don't know what we're waiting for now. I don't know what the situation is now. What is the next? Are we waiting to hear more information? Is it likely before Christmas? I just don't know.
Well, it must be, because nothing. At the end of the meeting, we went on to the Waddy Downs motion, which, to be honest with you, was just like there was no point. Not for the fact I understand. Xavier put the motions forward, and I fully understood and respected them. We were knackered. Let's be fair. It was at the end of the meeting. We had no
people
break.
were leaving before it got to that resolution.
We had no break. And can I just say, from a personal point of view, we should have had a break when we said, we should have had a break at 8:45. I just think you need to have. I don't know about you, but my brain was just like dead. A lot of people would have been working that day. Quarter of an hour just to have a bit of a break. It was a really warm room. Have a break. Just go and get some refreshments. Come back in a little bit. But it sort of died a little bit. Do you know what I mean? And I just think all I would say from my personal point of view is I don't think you do a temperature check and ask I think you just say it. But do you know what? 15-minute break. Have a break. Come back. And even for Mark Davis, he was standing up and talking for all that long. Just have a break. That's all I was, But yeah, the Waddy Downs motion was at the end, wasn't it? But there was no. What I mean, my point is that there was no this is the next steps. From my point of view, we're just waiting for that next communication from the Don's Trust. that we're waiting now, isn't it? I don't see. Are we going to get more update in a program on match day? We've got a match on Saturday. After that, we're not at Kings Meadow until New Year.
29th?
Yeah, we've got 2 games over the New Year period, haven't we?
Yeah.
So, people want information now, don't they? So it would be good if the Dons. I know we've got some open meetings planned this week, although I think breaking news from breaking news. It won't be by the time it's Friday.
Yeah, the meeting's been cancelled.
Yeah, the Thursday one's been cancelled. So are we going to wait until those open meetings have been completed and then have a communication? But we do need. The biggest thing now is, and we've said this all along on the Dons Trust board and the Dons Trust throughout the years, communication. This is the biggest test now about communication, because at the moment, if you go on social media, it's just people are just scaremongering. That's blatantly what it is. People are scaremongering from what point of view you have. We have it in our own little WhatsApp group, don't we? Do you know what I mean? So, in terms of 2 ends of scaremongering, we just need a communication to come out and give us an update.
In terms of the rumoured investors, I have decided to start speculating, Stu, because we don't know who they are. So what I've done is I've gone online to a random generator of famous rich people, and I've got
live in Wimbledon.
3 names. Sadly, I don't know if they live in Wimbledon. It'll be interesting to find out. However, I'm now going to treat this as if this is actually the case. So I can exclusively reveal, Stu, the names of the 3 people that are behind these investment opportunities, and they are the dream team of Kate Winslet, Gemma Arterton, and Ariana Grande. Pretty solid 3, I think. I'd be quite happy if they came in and bought the club, to be honest with you. I would say yes immediately. Do you want me to just do another... Go on.
But that wouldn't be based on what they can offer. It'd be more a case of what they can be visually looking at.
Well, how about Amir Khan, Martin Sheen, and Ashley Tisdale? How would that go down with you?
Well, do you know what? I would definitely have someone like Jamie Oliver, because the catering would be better than what it is.
It always comes down to yeah.
So I personally would rather have people that have skills that can be used. So Jamie Oliver would be one of mine.
Okay.
You put me on a spot now. I'm trying to think of who.
Well, okay, this is the final one I've done, and the final one I will do. So it's Kim Kardashian, Charlie Chaplin, and Jay-Z. Imagine they owned your football club. That would be amazing.
Yeah.
Hey, tell you what, communication would improve with Charlie Chaplin. See what I did there? No, just me. Okay, bye.
We need someone like maybe Stormzy to join Jamie Oliver. Purely for the fact he does a lot of work in the community and stuff like that.
No, I'm just going to talk over you.
And they pretty much in the entertainment at half time. Could you imagine that at half time? Do a little bit of a gig at half time. You get loads of fans in.
No. No. Can we put that as a restricted action vote? If we can, if Stormzy wants to appear at Kings Meadow, he has to get like 99.9% of the Dons Trust membership in favour, with a turnout of 80%. Anyway,
but you know what you should do actually. I think it's quite funny actually what you've done there. We should now set a challenge to people listening on Twitter, or email us in or anything like that. Who would be your ideal 3 people to invest, and let us know. What we've said about catering. Who would be the best? What 3 people would you have if you could have anybody in the world investing in Wimbledon?
Alexa Bliss. Anyway, we are. It's pretty much. We're coming up for the end of our hourly, Stu, or you've probably gone over it. I've lost track of where we are, to be honest with you, because we've recorded this podcast in so many different parts because of great Wi-Fi issues. Thank you very much, Virgin Media. Mm-hmm. We do have some football to talk about. You've mentioned it there. Very quickly, I think a point away at Bolton is actually a good point. I'd have taken it beforehand. Obviously, 95th minute equaliser. Oh, yeah, by the way, it doesn't matter if it came after the... what people saying, well, there were 4 minutes added, but the goal was scored after 4 minutes and 42 seconds. Yes, as we've had this conversation, pretty much for as long as I can remember, from the age of 15, so like 10 years, I've had people say this, it's a minimum added time. It does not mean that at exactly 4 minutes the game ends. We know this. Stop moaning about it. What you should be more annoyed about is our defending.
It just depends who you are. It just depends who you are, don't it? If you're Man United, you've got more time, the old Fergie time. If you're Wimbledon, or if you're who else, or a small club, Pompey.
Watford, tiny club.
Did it don't get? Yeah, you're right. It doesn't matter when that goal went in. It's still a rubbish goal. Yeah, you would have taken a point at the start of it, but to lead twice and to lead again into the late part of the game and just throw it away, because that's what it was. I watched a game from. I was obviously abroad over the weekend, so I watched a game on iFollow, and Bolton were bang average. They were there for the taking, and points dropped. Point drops massively.
Bolton are actually level on points with us, aren't they, in terms of points accumulated? Obviously, their points deduction means, of course, that they are still bottom. But, yeah, they had minus 15, didn't they? So they're currently on 2. So they're on 17, and we're on 17. Obviously, before we played each other the weekend, we were on 16, and they were on 16. I just hadn't picked up on that before. Southend just continued to implode. Tranmere losing, the other lot losing. It's becoming a little bit of a bottom 6, I think, affair. Although Accrington got Tranmere drew with Accrington, didn't they, which helped neither of those two either. So it all feels very irrelevant, really, at this moment in time. I think whatever happens in terms of our finances, a step back into League Two is almost inevitable, isn't it, over the next couple of years? So whether that's this season, next season, whatever, I think it's going to happen. Do you have much enthusiasm for the actual football on Saturday? I know there are other things around the game which you will have enthusiasm for, but does the 90 minutes excite you at this moment?
Really. No, I said last week, I found it very difficult to concentrate on the football side of it. I did listen to the Glyn Hodges match post comments after the game.
Post match comments, post match interview.
Just missing out a few words.
Just a few.
I did listen to it. Yeah, Joe Watt. He said, "Hey, look, Joe Watt. They will learn from it. We shouldn't be doing things. He's not going to cane the team because realistically, we picked up a win against a last home game. I can't remember who it was against. Gillingham, wasn't it?
It was Gillingham, yes.
Oh God, dude, that was our last home game. It feels a lifetime away. But we have picked up 4 points, and it's we've moaned that we haven't picked up any draws away from home. Well, we just got our first draw, so yeah, Joel, you have to look at the positives. But yeah, I don't know. Doncaster, we played him. Obviously, it's the third time in about 6-7 weeks, and you normally look at it and go, realistically, are they going to get? You obviously got a draw and then a win. You sort of think law of averages say that we're probably get something out of the game. But yeah, I don't know. It's so difficult when you've got there's bigger issues than what's on the pitch at the moment. And I think a lot of people are going to feel that way on Saturday. Not people on Saturday at the game are not going to be talking about the game. Really, going to be talking about what's your opinion. Everyone's going to be going. It's the Brexit thing, isn't it? You're going to be either going to leave or you're going to remain. You're going to invest or not invest. That's what's going to be the conversation, which is sad, and it's going to affect the atmosphere, I believe.
Yeah, it will do. Last game before Christmas. So there we have it. Doncaster currently 13th in League One and have only lost 4 of their 16 fixtures, but lots of draws in there. So they're winless in 3. To be honest with you, I think that's pretty much us done for this week. Thank you to Peter B at JustAdon88 for correctly identifying Jason Donovan, Too Many Broken Hearts in the World, as our intro song on last week's podcast, if you recognise it this week. I knew you'd love it. I knew you'd love it. So good.
The album's really good as well. I'm joking.
Donovan is a first name in some cultures, so Jason doesn't actually have a surname, which is a bit of a problem for me.
Talking about cheese, just very quickly.
Sorry. It took me a moment there to go, sorry, what? Talking about, breakfast.
Cheesy music. Travelling to Kingsmeadow on Monday, big advert with David Hasselhoff in 9 to 5 on the musical. And I'm just thinking, I'd love to go and see that. David Hasselhoff, Kit, Knight Rider, legend, do you know what I mean? But proper cheese. Just thought I had that.
Thanks for that.
That's right.
At 9YRS Podcast for your song titles, years and artists for this week's intro song, and then also at 9YRS Podcast for updates from the game with Doncaster on Saturday. Sense my enthusiasm, listeners. Something else I was going to say. Oh yeah, youtube.co.uk/9YRS podcast. The video from Monday's SGM is up there. All 3 hours of it. It's like WrestleMania, just without basically without Alexa Bliss, really, which is a shame. So on that note, Stu, I think that is everything. Can you say a prayer for me editing this week's show?
Yes, I give you. I don't know. I can't say I'm going to give you a prayer. I will pray for you that you managed to, to be fair, make me sound even better than what I am, really.
No problems. Well, thank you for joining me.
Good luck.
Thank you for joining me this week.
That's okay, no problem at all.
Alexa Bliss bag first, milk last. We will speak to you again next Friday. And for those of you wondering, I know lots of people will be interested because we had the general election yesterday, if you're listening to this on day of release, and people want to know how we voted. Isn't that right, Stu? People will be interested to hear who we voted for.
I'm sure they will.
So I'm quite happy to say that this general election 2019, I voted for